The year is 479 BCE, and the shores of Salamis still smolder from the battle the poets will later worship. The tide drags at broken oars and splintered shields, pulling them back into a sea that reeks of smoke and something metallic, something that tastes like blood and endings. Greece will claim victory here. They will carve that word into marble, lift it into temples, and sing it across symposium halls for centuries. But the beach tells another story, a story the epics refuse to carry. From the hills, a sound rises, not the echo of triumph, not the roar of soldiers drunk on glory. It is thinner, sharper, a sound that grates the air like a knife dragged across stone. Screaming, the kind that comes not from battle, but from terror that has no rescue, no witness, no name. Follow that sound and you find them. Thousands of canvas tents, stretched across the coast like a ghost army. Their walls snap violently in the wind, but inside them no soldiers rest. These are not barracks. They are holding pens. And inside those pens are the real spoils of Xerxes' campaign. Not gold, not treasure. Women, daughters of Athens, Corinth, Thebes, Megara, girls who watched their fathers collapse in doorways. Mothers who hid infants in jars, praying the little ones would suffocate quietly before Persian hands found them. Women who believed the worst thing that could happen was seeing their homes burn. They were wrong, because they were still alive. What came next was not chaos or cruelty born of war. It was something far colder: policy. A machine built into the bones of the Persian Empire, humming beneath every conquest. Xerxes did not simply want Greek land. He wanted Greek bloodlines. He wanted their daughters. So as flames still flickered on the water, these women were dragged into rows, catalogued, stripped of names, futures, and the right to hope. Their screams rose over a battlefield Greece believed it had won. And yet, in these tents, the war was only beginning. Here, in the shadows of victory, the machinery of empire turned with brutal efficiency. Silent, methodical, unstoppable. And the daughters of Hellas, unseen by generals and forgotten by history, became its first victims. This is the chapter the poets erased, and the one we must remember. To understand what awaited the daughters of Hellas, you must first understand the machine that swallowed them. Xerxes I was not simply a monarch sitting upon a jeweled throne. He was the living embodiment of an empire that stretched from the Indus River to the edge of the Aegean. A world ruled not only by armies and bronze but by a quieter, colder force, the administrative engine behind the harem system. Forget the myths of silk cushions and perfume chambers. The harem was never built for pleasure. It was built for control. When Xerxes crossed into Greece, he brought with him nearly 500,000 men. Only a fraction were soldiers. The rest were the real architects of conquest: slavers, scribes, registrars, linguistic specialists, and officials trained to dismantle a society. From the inside out, their weapons were not spears but clay tablets. Their battlefield was the census of the defeated. Their mission was simple: record everything. Every burning village, every emptied home, every survivor. Who fled, who resisted, who could be harvested, especially the women. For the Persians understood a truth that frightened even their enemies. To truly destroy a people, you don't slaughter their armies. You take their daughters, bend their tongues, shape their children, bury their memories under new rituals and new gods until old identities crumble like ash. And it worked. By the time Xerxes retreated from Salamis and Plataea, over 40,000 Greek women and children had already been funneled into the imperial system. Some were shipped to estates as domestic labor where their Greek names dissolved the moment they stepped onto Persian soil. Others vanished deeper into the empire's interior, their fates unrecorded. But the youngest, those judged strong, healthy, desirable, or simply rare, were marked for a far more calculated purpose: integration into the imperial harem system, the engine meant to breed the next generation of loyal intermediaries. These girls would not be chained to whips or sold in markets. Their conquest was subtler, more insidious. They would learn new languages. They would be given new roles. They would become the mothers of children raised Persian in everything but blood children who would later govern the very lands their mothers once called home. This was the brilliance and the horror of Xerxes' design. A conquest fought not with swords, but with births. Not with destruction, but with rewriting the future one stolen daughter at a time. At Phaleron, where the surf rolled in quietly as if trying to wash away the sins of an empire, the Persians prepared to withdraw. But their ships would not leave empty. The real victory, the one no Greek poet would ever carve into stone, was happening now, far from the battlefields and the bronze. Civilians who hadn't escaped in time were rounded up in tight clusters, guarded like livestock. The Persians even had a word for it: processing. A term suited for lumber and grain, never human beings. Presiding over this grim production line was General Artabazus, a man whose name survives in both Herodotus' writings and the clay archives of Persepolis. He surveyed the captives with the cold precision of a merchant appraising incoming cargo. Battles no longer mattered. The war he cared about now was fought with clipboards and styluses, not spears. The sorting began with terrifying speed. Girls under 12 were separated first. Their fates were to be rewritten slowly and deliberately until the memories of Greece dissolved from their tongues. Women over 30 were marched toward the northeast, destined for labor camps where hunger and exhaustion were the empire's executioners. Then came the group every Persian official watched closely: the young women between 13 and 25. The ones considered most useful. A 16-year-old from Megara was dragged forward, her bare feet stumbling across the sand. Her mother lunged for her, wailing, until a soldier backhanded her with such force that she crumpled but did not die. Death would have been mercy. The Persians wanted her awake, aware, and shattered. Breaking a mother's will was the first blow in breaking a nation's soul. Inside a canvas inspection tent, the girl stood trembling as a scribe, calm, detached, almost bored, documented her like she was a damaged shipment. His stylus scratched steadily across clay. Age, height, condition of teeth, scars, verification of virginity. He never once met her eyes. This was conquest through paperwork, domination through bureaucracy. The Persians did not simply take bodies, they categorized them, standardized them, optimized them. One surviving administrative seal, hardened by fire and saved by accident, records the horror with chilling indifference. Delivered to Susa, 120 Greek females, ages 14 to 22. Condition acceptable. Acceptable. No lament, no humanity. This wasn't slavery in the crude sense. It was a governmental operation, a calculated strategy to convert the daughters of Greece into the empire's newest, unwilling assets, and it had only just begun. The Persian Empire understood something far older and far darker than warfare. A body can be captured in a day, but a mind must be dismantled slowly. That is why not all Greek captives were shipped east immediately. Instead, thousands of young women were sent to holding camps spread across Asia Minor, places that looked nothing like prisons but operated with a far more insidious purpose. These were re-education centers designed not to punish but to rewrite. The Persians had learned from generations of conquest that a woman thrown directly into imperial service would cling desperately to scraps of her old world. A whispered prayer to her gods, a lullaby from her childhood, the memory of her mother's hands. Such women resisted. They hid their language inside their bones. They waited for rescue that never came. So the empire adapted. It learned to break identity first. Here, the main Greek girl, 16, terrified, but still fighting to hold on to who she was, would be forced into strict daily drills. Girls were made to repeat Persian phrases until their throats burned. They were trained to bow the proper way, to eat unfamiliar food, to abandon Greek posture and walk with the controlled elegance of Persian court women. Their names were replaced with numbers or new titles. Their clothing was stripped away, replaced with coarse garments bearing the mark of their captors. Those who resisted were starved, not enough to kill, just enough to weaken. Those who obeyed were rewarded with slightly thicker stew or an extra scrap of bread. It was psychological warfare disguised as routine. Archaeologists would not uncover the full horror until 1958, when a mass grave near Sardis exposed the empire's methodical cruelty. Over 300 female skeletons were found, all dating to the early 5th century BCE. The bones told a story the chronicles never dared to record. Rib cages thinned by long starvation, skull fractures from repeated blunt force trauma, joint damage consistent with 14-hour labor cycles, patterns of abuse so uniform they could only have come from a system, not a moment of violence. But the most haunting detail was this: most skulls faced west, toward Greece, toward home. Even in death, they turned their faces to the land they were being forced to forget. This was not punishment. This was erasure, a deliberate stripping of identity designed to turn daughters of Hellas into blank silhouettes the empire could refill however it wished. By the time the first Greek captives reached Susa, they had already endured the breaking of their names, their tongues, and their memories. But nothing could prepare them for the imperial city itself. Rising from the earth like something carved from myth, Susa shimmered with towering columns painted in impossible colors, gardens perfumed with foreign flowers, and halls gilded with patterns that no Greek artisan had ever imagined. To the exhausted young women, it looked like another world, beautiful, alien, and terrifying. But behind that beauty sat the engine of Persian conquest. The royal harem, not a chamber of indulgence but an administrative core of the empire. Here, women were not measured by desire, they were measured by usefulness. Upon arrival, each Greek girl was assigned to one of several ranks: domestic servants, who scrubbed halls and fetched water; concubines, who lived under strict surveillance; childbearers chosen for noble Persian households. This was not a place of decadence. This was genetic colonialism, a strategy so subtle and far-reaching that it reshaped entire provinces without ever drawing a sword. Children born of Greek mothers and Persian fathers grew up fully Persian, fluent in the language, loyal to the empire, and perfectly positioned to serve as scribes, soldiers, translators, and regional administrators. They became the empire's bridge to the lands their mothers had once called home. But not every girl could or would bend. One of them was Talia, her name preserved only because a Babylonian tablet happened to survive the centuries. She refused to speak Persian, refused to bow, refused even to eat the food placed before her. For this, she was assigned to the palace weaving rooms, a sentence worse than chains. 14 hours a day, she worked under suffocating heat, her hands raw and bleeding, her rations reduced until she could barely stand. She lasted 8 months. Her death was recorded with chilling indifference. Exhaustion. Others survived by surrendering parts of themselves piece by piece. One woman, Roxanne, managed to write a letter home. The tablet preserved only fragments, but the meaning is unmistakable. I am well. I have learned the prayers. I have given the steward a son. He is beautiful, but he will never know your name. I am not who I was. Her survival had become her complicity. Her child, another instrument in the empire's long, quiet conquest. For a small number of Greek women, freedom did eventually come, but it arrived like a haunting, not a homecoming. Some were released by sympathetic owners, others ransomed by desperate families, and a few managed to escape the labyrinth of Persia's administrative machine. But when they finally set foot on Greek soil, they discovered the most devastating truth of all. Home was gone, or rather, home no longer wanted them. One of the clearest testimonies comes from Eretria, carved into stone around 460 BCE. It tells the story of a woman named Harmonia, who returned after 12 long years in Persian hands. She brought with her a child, a boy no older than 6, with his mother's Greek eyes and his father's unmistakable Persian features. She must have imagined reunion, her mother's arms around her, the smell of old olive trees, the sound of familiar voices calling her name. But the moment she stepped inside the city walls, everything collapsed. Eretria rejected her, legally, publicly, brutally. The city records are merciless, defiled by barbarian touch, mother of mixed blood. Her citizenship was revoked. Her family refused to take her in. Doors shut. Voices fell silent. People turned their backs rather than meet her eyes. To accept her would mean acknowledging the part of the war Greece desperately wanted to forget, that victory had not protected. Every daughter. That some had come home carrying not triumph, but scars and foreign children. So she and her boy were exiled. Where they went, no one knows. Their story dissolves into silence. And Harmonia was not alone. Across the Greek world, these women drifted through their old cities like shadows. They were touched by trauma, marked by foreignness, burdened by children who didn't belong anywhere. They carried memories their homeland refused to look at, memories carved into their hands, their sleep, their trembling voices. Historian Theopompus wrote of them centuries later, calling them the silent women. They move through the agora, but no one sees them. They were ghosts among the living, alive but erased, bearing witness to a history Greece preferred to bury. Beneath sculptures, victories, and patriotic hymns, their suffering did not fit the heroic narrative. So the narrative simply pretended they had never returned. And in that denial, another cruelty was born, a home that would rather forget its daughters than face what had been done to them. For centuries, Greece polished the story of the Persian Wars until it gleamed like marble. Heroes, victories, divine favor, the triumph of freedom over tyranny. But beneath that shining surface, buried in the soil of Thebes, Attica, and Boeotia, lies a truth the poets never sang. A truth carved not in temples, but in graves. Archaeology, not literature, became the keeper of these women's voices. Excavations across Greece have uncovered burial sites dating to the mid-5th century BCE, and what they reveal is not the story of victorious Greece, but the aftermath no one wanted to face. Many skeletons belonged to women who had returned or been returned from captivity. Their bones told the parts the historians left out. Malnutrition worn into ribs, trauma etched into skulls, childbirth scars on girls barely past childhood. The signs were unmistakable. These were not women who died of age or illness. They died of what happened to them, and what continued happening long after they came home. One grave near Thebes captured this tragedy more clearly than any scroll ever could. The skeleton belonged to a young woman, likely no older than 22. Beside her lay a small clay tablet, baked hard by accident when the earth around her burned in some forgotten fire. The inscription was short, raw, and devastating. I am daughter of no one. I am mother of no one. I am the forgotten. Let this mark that I was. No name, no lineage, just a plea not to disappear entirely. This was the fate of countless Greek women, the daughters of Hellas, who survived captivity only to be erased by the very homeland they had longed for. Persia had taken their freedom, their language, their sense of self. But Greece, unwilling to acknowledge their suffering, delivered the final blow: silence. Because an empire can conquer through force, through armies and fire and the taking of cities. But the conquest that lasts the longest, the conquest that buries generations, is silence. These women were not martyrs or heroes. They left no grand speeches, no monuments, no descendants to speak their names. Their stories linger only in fragments. A broken tooth, a fractured rib, a tablet scratched by trembling hands. Yet, in these graves, history whispers the truth Greece would not tell. Their suffering built a shadow history beneath the official one. A story not of glory, but of what glory cost. By the metrics carved into history books, Xerxes failed. His fleet burned at Salamis, his armies broke at Plataea, and Greece declared itself the triumphant defender of freedom. But beneath the clang of shields and the triumph of generals lies a quieter truth, one the poets never touched. Xerxes did not need to conquer Greece to claim a victory. He had already claimed its daughters. And through them he claimed something far more enduring. Within just 2 generations, Thousands of children born to Greek mothers and Persian fathers stood in the administrative courts of the Achaemenid Empire: scribes, interpreters, tax officials, soldiers. They governed Greek towns, mediated disputes, enforced imperial law, and spoke Persian with greater ease than Greek. Their mother's homeland had no place for them, and Persia made certain they belonged nowhere else. This was the empire's most brilliant strategy, a victory won not by the sword, but by assimilation. History remembers the battles, the ships at Salamis, the phalanxes at Plataea, the thunder of bronze. It remembers men with names etched into marble and marble etched into myth. But the women, those who vanished into camps, into harems, into graves whose soil kept their secrets for centuries, paid the price no inscription ever honored. Their bodies were taken, their names erased, their identities dissolved into the machinery of an empire that understood silence is a deeper weapon than steel. Yet, remarkably, they refused to disappear completely. Their stories resurfaced, where no one expected to find them, in shattered clay tablets baked accidentally in the fires of Persepolis, in inscriptions left beside lonely graves in Thebes and Sardis, in fragments carved by trembling hands that knew they had only a single chance to speak before being forgotten forever. A scratch on clay becomes a voice. A bone facing west becomes a witness. A single line, "I am the forgotten," becomes an indictment of nations. And now we read them. We are the first generation in 2,500 years able to gather their broken testimonies and stitch them back into history. Their voices are faint, fragile, almost lost, but not gone. Because the moment we speak them aloud, the moment we refuse to let their memory fade into the quiet grave of imperial silence, they return. This is their testimony, and it endures only because we choose to listen and refuse utterly to let them disappear again.